All right, good morning, everybody. We'll call this morning's meeting to order for the Clay County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, December 21st. And the first item is the approval of the agenda, and we do have an agenda addition, which is to discuss the OSHA vaccination and testing temporary standard. Also, our PIC committee had reviewed the items, and on item number 5, wait a minute, no, I want to get it right here. It's item number 5 on the attachment J. Item number 5 of attachment J, we would like to remove that for today, and we will come back with that. That is regarding the furlough program. So, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right, we will move into citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard? Items not on the agenda. Any citizens to be heard? Any online?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, we will move into the approval of bills and vouchers. Yeah.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Cayley. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Motion carried. At this time, we have a recognition to hear about this morning, and I happened to see this in the media. But Kathy, do you want to come up and introduce Rory? Have Rory come on up, and we don't want you sitting in the back of the room on this big day for you here.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to congratulate Rory Beal in receiving the City of Moorhead Human Rights Award in the Civic Community category. Rory works for Clay County Public Health, and he also works with the multitude of organizations that are serving our diverse populations in our community. So Rory is recognized for his work in working with the populations to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So this is just an excerpt from the nominations. Rory Beal was instrumental in helping provide resources to the New American community during the pandemic. Rory worked to increase COVID awareness, helped to bridge language barriers by providing resources in New American languages, and assisted with programs that help children successfully navigate their online schooling. Rory helped with training peer specialists, raised vaccination awareness, and also increased mental health awareness for the New American community. So please join me in congratulating Rory, and I want to say a couple of words.
Thanks, Kathy. So feels a little awkward here, but so I would like to say this. You know, I received the award. If you heard some of the things that were mentioned in the nomination, I was really like the conduit between the county and the New American community. The CARES committee here ultimately chose to fund some things to help with schooling. My colleagues Jamie and Becky did some interviews with Somali television. I helped to connect them, and so I'm kind of the conduit for the good people who work here, and I'm a generalist that does that connecting. But I'm proud that we've been able to develop trust with a group that is highly motivated and very grateful. So, thanks.
Rory, I was going to mention that too. As a member of the CARES committee, you were quite the advocate for all these different groups and the New Americans, and for that, I think that a lot of people should be grateful for that. You certainly were a voice for them and that helped us make some decisions at the level for recommendation to the full board for funding of those. So congratulations to your award. It was well deserved.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I gave you all a picture of that and the award. So just the visual. So thank you, Rory.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Kathy, we'll go into your COVID-19 update, and you have Jamie and, oh, you want to do, okay, you will do this ones first? You want to do the grant first?
Whichever.
Okay,
Is
let's do
that
the
okay
grant
with
first.
you? Okay,
That's fine.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. I told Troy that he would be next, so thanks for
Okay,
accommodating
yeah,
that.
that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
Morning.
We just thought we'd come forward today to notify the board that, Clay County in August did submit a grant proposal to the Department of Human Services, and Clay County Public Health did receive a $5 million grant through the Department of Human Services, and this money will be used for new construction or renovation for a regional substance use crisis facility. Additional funding will be required to meet the grant proposal costs of approximately $12 million, and we are currently working on finalizing the contract and getting things in place for that. So that's our big announcement. It was a lot of work. It was done in a very short amount of time. I think we had a great team that worked on it, and it's something we're pretty ecstatic about, I guess, is a good word for it. So,
Well, you're right, it was worked on for quite some time, and the fact that, there was just 2 of them?
Correct.
For the entire state?
That's correct.
And because the total grant availability was 10 million,
That's correct.
and for Clay County to get 5 million of that, it shows the hard work and dedication from you folks in helping us obtain that. And so now it's going to be our job to make sure that we can implement that grant in the best possible way for our citizens. Commissioner Ebinger?
Yeah, I want to wade into this because it's been, as Kathy knows, a big issue in my career here in Moorhead. And I'm really proud of the fact that you and your team have been as persistent as you've been in going after this funding and bringing a means to address a really serious problem we've got in our community. And maybe even go beyond that. Mental health issues along with addiction and substance abuse are just constantly in the sight of our social services, our law enforcement. It's just a huge issue. And this is going to help us address it, not just for our county, but in a regional approach. And I'm real proud of the fact that we have a team that can bring this kind of funding into it. And I want you to know I'll support anything we need to do to make this happen the way to reach capacity and the vision that you guys have. So just thank you for your efforts, and I'm looking forward to seeing this develop.
Okay, I saw Commissioner Kaylee's hand, and then Frank. Commissioner Kaylee.
I just want to add my congratulations and enthusiastic thank you to the whole team that put that together. When I was running, this was one of the things that I was really hoping we could make happen. I've spent my career working in public libraries, and so just like Commissioner Ebinger, anybody who works with the public, we've just seen the problems explode. And I know you work with it intimately daily, and what we have is not adequate. And it's not at a safety level that it should be. So I'm so excited to see this big step forward, and I know we need more funding, and I know there's lots more work to do, but you have our support, and this is a big move forward for a healthier community. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gross.
I was just glad to hear the other 2 commissioners are really want to support this project because, I mean, the $5 million is great, but that's just what you call a start. You know, so we've got a lot more funds to get the project done, but we've got a good plan there, the committee working on it, and I think Troy and Kathy will get this thing going, but it's just, there's so much more money to get here, and I don't know where it's going to come from, but I hope you guys got a big pocket. So, along with myself, I support this too.
We'll come up with a plan. Won't we, Kathy?
We will. Bake sales will get started pretty soon.
All right.
Well, thank
Well,
you.
again, congratulations on the hard work and the end result was very positive for us. So thank you, Troy.
Thanks, Troy.
All right, Kathy, now you want to bring up Jamie and
Rest of the
Becky and, got a squeaky door over there.
Yes, no doubt. Okay, so we'll get started. My screen was a little bit different. So we'll talk about the active cases, as we always do. So December 13th, we had 378, and now December 20th, 397. So it's been fluctuating over the last couple months. We've been seeing ups and downs, so that's not necessarily unusual. Active cases in Minnesota, December 13th, we had 35,033, and then December 20th, 27,085. So again, that's a pretty big dip. There may be some catch-up cases that need to happen across the state, but that's the number on the 20th that we have. Active cases in Cass County, again, they fluctuate a little bit, just so they're remaining about the same, 697 and then 696 on the 20th. And then in North Dakota, December 13th, that was 2,236, and then 2,100 in December 20th. Okay, so the active cases by age, again, we've looked at this every week, and we still continue to see the high numbers in the kids and the young adults. That has not changed, just fluctuates a little bit through the age groups there. And then we're seeing the Clay County cases per week. And you can see that overall, the cases reported by week since August, which was right around the time we started to see the case numbers climbing after the summer lull. Then the gray bar is a preliminary number of reported cases for last week. So we see that 235, which will surpass the number of reported cases from December 5th. The next slide is our case trends per week, so you can see the broad overview of the COVID waves that we have. So the 4 waves we've been watching. We haven't sustained a downward trend yet. So, nationally, they're talking about a couple more weeks, but, hard to predict that. It's a virus, so it's really difficult and challenging to predict when we're going to see a continual downward trend. And then we're seeing, again, the total cumulative cases by age. So total cases is 12,903, and the graph just shows the breakdown of the age groups.
It's the same person's reporting every week? I mean, do we get a report from everybody every week to make this consistent too? that these-
Yes, it's from the Minnesota Department of Health, so that is correct. Yep, it's consistent. Okay, Becky.
Good morning. Before moving on to more data, I just wanted to provide a brief update on what we do know about the new variant, Omicron. There's still much we don't know for certain, and we're seeing science and research kind of play out in real time. So I would just, urge patience, because sometimes when we're seeing this play out in real time, the communication can be a challenge. So I would expect things to change as we learn more. As I'm sure you're all aware, Omicron has been found in almost every state in the U.S., including Minnesota and North Dakota. It's also spreading worldwide. Preliminary data is showing with relative certainty that this variant is very, very contagious, even more so than Delta. If that winds up holding true, we can likely anticipate another surge of cases as Omicron takes over Delta as the dominant strain. There's also some evidence that is showing that this variant is capable of some level of immune evasion. So that means that we will likely see an increase in reinfections and breakthrough infections. Another concern is what this means for therapeutics. So there's been some lab studies that have shown that the most commonly used monoclonal antibody treatments may not be effective against this strain. There are, however, some more promising treatments that are more of a broad spectrum drug that are promising, but those won't be widely available for some time. So some concerning news coming out, about that. At this point, it doesn't look like a new vaccine will be needed, so that's good news. Boosters will play a very important role. The point of boosters is that they increase the level of neutralizing antibodies that we have, and this is considered our first line of defense in our immune system. So if the virus enters your body, these neutralizing antibodies, if we have enough of them, they will essentially attack the virus before we become infected. So the second line of defense in the immune system is what prevents serious illness and hospitalizations and deaths, and that comes from immune cells that are called T cells. And these appear to remain effective, and they're more long-lasting than those neutralizing antibodies. So while we might see more breakthroughs as Omicron can push past, that first line of defense, we are hopeful that the virus will not be able to stand up to these T cells, and so we'll be able to prevent hospitalizations and deaths. So bottom line, get vaccinated and get boosted when you're eligible. Some reports have indicated that Omicron may lead to less severe symptoms, and time will tell, if that winds up holding true. Any questions with that before I go on? I can try to answer.
Yes, Commissioner Keeley.
Hi, Becky. We're seeing some chatter in news sources about, since Omicron is more highly transmissible, that maybe people should be switching to N95 masks or double masking. Can you talk about that a little bit and what you're hearing?
Yeah, I can try. Not all masks are created equal, so the cloth face coverings are not as effective as, like surgical masks. Obviously the fit-tested N95s are the most effective, but it's not feasible for the general public to walk around wearing those. So that's, I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but wearing a well-fitted mask, especially over your nose, is important. We see lots of people that just wear it around, their mouth, and that's really not protecting you because the virus enters through the nasal cavity. So making sure that you're wearing a mask that's well-fitting is key.
Is it more highly transmissible because the viral load that's being shed is higher, or?
That appears to be part of it, but there's also been some lab studies where they've actually taken human tissue from the respiratory tract and human tissue from lungs, and they've compared side by side the rate that the Delta variant versus the Omicron variant infect these cells, and the Omicron was much, much faster.
Okay.
So this is the updated graph from the CDC, and it shows the level of community transmission, which really has remained unchanged for quite some time. We're still in that high level of transmission throughout all of Minnesota. This is the Clay County deaths per week, so we're still at 111 deaths throughout the whole pandemic. There has not been any newly reported deaths from last week. And this is the hospital admissions for Clay County, and so we really kind of reached a high point of hospitalizations a few weeks ago with 17 admitted in 1 week with COVID. Those numbers have gone down a little bit. So for last week, we've had 8 admissions that we've known about so far, but still at a level that's concerning. This is the hospital capacity information that we have for Fargo. Hospital capacity continues to be a concern, not just for COVID patients, but trauma patients, other, infections. We are starting to see flu activity pick up. So if people have not gotten their flu vaccine, please do so. Flu tends to be worse for the very young and the very old. So at the time of this report, there were a total of 3 staffed adult ICU beds available in Fargo and 1 pediatric ICU bed available. Throughout North Dakota, a total of 13 ICU beds were available, and the only pediatric ICU bed that was available was the one in Fargo. This is just the North Dakota specific hospitalization data due to COVID. So ICU patients, or the number of patients that are admitted to the ICU are up a bit this week at 19. The total number of hospitalized is actually down a little bit. Last week was 165, this week is 141. And there are currently 2 pediatric cases hospitalized. And then the graph on the right just breaks down the age groups throughout the pandemic. This is our broken record slide again, showing the updated Sanford Healthcare System data as of December 14th. Continue to see the same trend week after week after week. COVID patients typically, are not vaccinated or not fully vaccinated. So 48 of the 50 patients that are on ventilators right now are not vaccinated. And this is the breakthrough data from the Minnesota Department of Health. So right now, we're at 3.765% of fully vaccinated people have wound up testing positive for COVID. Breakthrough hospitalizations and deaths still remain relatively low, or very low. So main point here is that vaccination is continuing to offer protection against hospitalizations and deaths.
So Becky, when we have these breakthrough cases, we don't see a comparative percentage from weeks past like we do in some of your other charts. And I'm wondering now, when we're talking about this Omicron variant that's coming out there, I wonder if it would be good for us to kind of flag. I just happened to see in the media now that the first case of Omicron was found in Cass County, I think yesterday is what I think I saw. But it might be interesting to see, once the Omicron takes hold here more often, what that breakthrough percentage might change, or if it changes in regards to that. So it'd be interesting if we could kind of monitor that to see as this new variant comes forward, and if it shows a higher degree or a lesser degree of reinfection, or for those who have had vaccines already. Did you have a comment, Commissioner Gabringer?
Yeah, just, and not to overwhelm us with new data sets, but I think it'd be relevant, not so much for our purposes here, but I'm wondering if the state is going to monitor the efficacy of boosters in dealing with, particularly with a new strain. I mean, we're almost getting to the point where we're comparing people who have been vaccinated, which full vaccination is 2, compared to the unvaccinated. I think we're almost getting to the point where somebody needs to track, or we need to see data that shows how much more effective the immunizations are if you've got a booster. And, I got boosted. There was news report yesterday, and I can't remember the multiplier, but it was like 30 times more if you have more resistance after you've been boosted. And, this is information I really would like the public to be aware of. We've been preaching get immunized, but we're moving into a period now where I got my shots 10 months ago, and they're not going to be effective if I don't get a booster. And I hope there'll be a data set out there that we or the state health department, somebody can present, get that information through the public.
Yes, I agree. And I think that data is being tracked. It's just there's a huge lag time with it. At the county level, it's difficult for us to get that information, but the CDC and MDH are tracking that data. And that's part of what they've used to make the recommendation now that everybody over the age of 18 should be boosted, because we are seeing that waning immunity, especially with the neutralizing antibodies that I spoke about. So the vaccines are still effective because of the T-cell response, that second line of defense, so they're still very effective at preventing hospitalizations and deaths, but we will see an increase of breakthroughs because of those antibody levels that are waning.
Mr. Cayley.
So anecdotally, I have been watching that breakthrough cases number increase each week. It was 1 point something, and then after a while it was 2 point something, and now we're 3.765%. So it is going up. I just want to say that we know from all of this data that you've just presented, this fourth wave is being driven by the unvaccinated. It is the unvaccinated, by and large, who are getting sick and who are allowing for more variants like Omicron to develop. And we don't know what the next one is yet. And so everyone needs to do their part if possible. Take the advice of your doctor, but if possible, get vaccinated. Get your children vaccinated so that we can fight this and end this.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, good morning. Moving on, we've been tracking the statewide data, and this data that we're sharing with you today is as of 12/16 for 5 and over. And at this point, almost 67% of the Minnesota residents that are 5 and over are fully vaccinated. So we've made a lot of progress on that. And then the total that have received the booster or third dose now is at 1.5 million. And then it was 1.3 million last week when we presented. So again, significant increase in those doses. Little by little, we are getting people vaccinated. I think the more we keep talking about the need and for vaccine and the more we have an opportunity, the more people are likely to get vaccinated. We continue to have lots of opportunities in our community for vaccine. I'm going to just flip to the next slide there and talk about Clay County Public Health. So our numbers are decreasing. However, we continue every week to have clinics at the Family Service Center. We're offering first doses, second doses, and booster doses. We drop down to the age group that's available for vaccine as quickly as we can. And so this week we have a clinic and we are offering the booster doses for 16 and 17-year-olds that's now been approved as well. So overall, it's been 18,541 doses that Clay County Public Health has administered. And then for last week, it was, flip to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
123 doses that were administered by Clay County Public Health. We had 11 that were first doses, 2 that were second doses, third doses and boosters were 94. Pediatric doses in that 5 through 11. First doses were 5, and then the second doses were 11. So we continue to have clinics for those families that are bringing their children back for their second dose as well. This week, we're holding just one clinic, and it is Wednesday, tomorrow, from 2:30 to 5 at the Family Service Center. We're using the IT room or whatever it's called, and the building, and then we're doing Pfizer vaccine. Well, we're doing first, second, and booster doses. I mentioned the boosters for 16, 17-year-olds and continuing to serve the 5 through 11 this week. And then also, as long as we were talking a little bit about flu, I will say we still have lots of flu vaccine available. So if you need a flu vaccine, call our office and we'd be happy to help you with that as well. And then I'm going to just talk a little bit about the testing data next then. So we continue to have opportunities for testing in the community. And this last week of December 12th, we had 420 people that came in for testing, pretty close to an even breakdown between Minnesota and non-Minnesota residents. And then 43 of those tested positive. So our positivity rate for the week was 10.24%. It's a little bit higher than it was the previous week. But a lot of people that are coming in are also finding that they do not have COVID as well. So there's a lot of viruses out there. Best way you can tell is to get tested whether you know you have COVID or not. So, and that's it.
Commissioner Gross.
Are we going to the schools to vaccinate at all, or?
You know, we haven't been, just because the schools have not wanted us to do that, but that's why we're doing our evening clinics and having opportunities for people to come after school and after work to get vaccine in our office, so.
So what were those hours again, this coming week?
So for tomorrow, our clinic is from 2:30 to 5. And again, those, you know, you can register online or you can call our office if you need some help getting that scheduled.
There was another day too, up till 11 or something like that, or?
This is the only one that we're doing this week.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioner Gross, like Jamie said, we meet with our superintendents every week, and we have made multiple offers to go out to their schools, but again, they've chosen to not have us come out to the schools. They have, they feel like there's opportunities for all the families, so we've made the offer many times.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kaylee.
You mentioned that there's lots of flu vaccine available too. Is it possible for a family to come in and get their COVID vaccines and flu vaccines at the same time?
Absolutely.
And if they register online, is there a way to indicate that, or is it best to just call or ask when you come in?
Just ask when you come in. We've done quite a few flu shots in conjunction with our COVID vaccines.
And just for the public, I want to say, when Public Health gave me my flu shot, that was the easiest shot I've ever had in my life. I didn't even feel it. They're really good. So, thanks.
And just one more comment, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, you know, Christmas, New Year's, the holidays are upon us. And so the recommendations from CDC and MDH is, you know, obvious, get your vaccination before you gather with multiple households and family and friends. If you aren't aware of what the vaccine status is and you're getting together with a large group, you know, you are at risk, because again, it's the unvaccinated and this, as Becky described, pretty in detail, is, you know, the new strain is really rapidly transmissible. So, you know, you have to gauge your risk about who you're gathering with. And then also, are there people that are immunocompromised in your gatherings, or those with chronic health conditions, or those that aren't eligible for the vaccine? So just a word of caution that, you know, we're in the depths of this, and it's good to gather, and we want to do that. Just be conscientious of the risks of the people you're gathering with.
Okay,
If
I
you're
know.
sick, don't get together with anyone.
Yes, if you're sick, stay home and stay home alone. To the point where you don't need medical assistance.
That's correct.
Last week, I had mentioned that we should talk a little bit about this mask deal again. I'm going to suggest we just not even have that conversation today. For one thing, we don't have our full board here, and there are some other developments that are going on that we need to take into consideration in this overall picture, what goes on our campus. So if it's all right with the board, we'll just kind of delay that conversation today and move on. I know that we have a public hearing scheduled at 9 o'clock. But Kathy, I know we're going to have a discussion, an agenda addition that I'm going to have to wait until probably after the public hearing.
Sure.
If you're busy, there might be some information that we might want from you that's, we can maybe get later too. So if you don't feel you can stay around, I know our public hearing is scheduled like for 40 minutes, so.
Oh, okay. Well,
I know
can
you're-
certainly come back as
I know you're busy, but we can, you know, we can play it by ear, and we can always notify you if we need something.
perfect.
Okay?
Okay,
Thank you for,
thank you.
thank you. Brian, I know, and Steve, we have this public hearing at 9. We have two real, I'm assuming will be real quick items. Do we have to, are we locked into this 9 o'clock time, or can I take these so we don't have staff waiting around here?
If they're really brief, I think we're okay.
I think we can make them really brief. I guess I would just as soon not have to have them wait the full 40 minutes. So Sheriff, let's see, who do we got first? Sheriff, we got you first. Can we take item number 3 real quick? And we try to do this real quick.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, for having us. Thank you for allowing me to, get this done rather quickly. As you're all aware, Jail Administrator Justin Roberts had indicated that he is going to be resigning from the department on January 7th, although he has agreed to stay until we do find his replacement. I'm requesting of the board today to start advertising for that position, and also when advertising for it, to advertise at line grade 24, step 1 through 5, to give us a little bit more of a negotiation, if we can get maybe more applicants that way, to make it a little bit more appealing and attractive to somebody out there.
This was brought before PIC, and it was our recommendation through PIC as well, that step 1 through 5 would be appropriate for advertising, so.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Do you have a question?
Yep, Sheriff, is this national search or statewide, or what are we doing?
We'll attempt to do it statewide. We'll work with HR to see what we can do here as far as the advertising and things like that. We know we have to advertise a little bit differently just because of the way staffing is now, and we have started doing some different advertising such as ZipRecruiter and things like that, so we will continue doing that as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, Justin. I just want to comment, Justin, thank you for, I know we've had several conversations since you made thank you for considering staying around a little bit longer. We obviously we're disappointed from our standpoint, being selfish, that you're leaving, but we wish you all the best in moving forward, so.
Appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm here to request to fill 2 full-time vacancies. We recently had 2 individuals resign from the department. They are within our 2021 and 2022 budget, and they are part of our DLC staffing plan. Because they're somewhat newer employees, I don't know that there is really any cost savings involved with them leaving.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cayley, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this time we will move in to our public hearing, and this is a Mortenson rezoning petition for property in Section 7 Gooseberry Township. And we have a fairly significant packet. Do we have a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Ebinger, second by Commissioner Cayley. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. All right. Matt, do you want to lead us through this discussion? Now, I do want to point out here as we go through this that any change to zoning requires a 4/5 vote of the board. And right now, we have not a full board here. So it might be, I don't know, I'm gonna lean on our county attorney here to,
So I was just sitting talking with Matt, and so it is a 4/5, so it's not a super majority that we're talking about, it's 4/5. So 4/5 of 4 is 3.2, meaning,
which one are we gonna divide up into?
right, meaning that which would be obviously impossible, we don't have
Right.
3.2 votes, so that would either require of the quorum that's here, all 4 voting in favor to do it, or I think what Matt is gonna recommend is that we would table the matter to allow for all 5 to be here to allow for a vote to go forward one way or the other that either gets a 4/5 or doesn't. Otherwise, I think you're gonna have a confusing matter.
So we could still gather the information in the public hearing that we're doing, right?
Correct.
And would the public hearing be recessed, or we would close the public hearing and then just render our decision later?
I think you could, right, I think you could do that. You could listen to all the information. If you table the matter, it's just tabled to allow for a vote at a later point. Obviously, one commissioner, whether, I don't know if she is or isn't listening online, but she would have to look through the rest of the pack and make sure she's informed to be able to make an informed vote. But the matter could be tabled, and then the only thing that would be left would be a vote.
Okay.
If the board chose to do that.
Okay,
Well, if we get a 4-0 vote today, would that'd be sufficient, wouldn't it?
It would be.
yeah, Yeah, if we have that.
Well, and if you want that, it's up to you to, I mean, I don't know what the vote looks like, and so.
I don't
mean,
even, I have no clue.
You know, so it's a matter of whether you want to go forward with that and see if there's a 4 vote. That's what you would need in order to make it so. If you don't want it so and get less, then it would not go forward and it would be denied. So it's,
So we can make that decision later on.
We could make it today. Let's see how this thing, I just wanted to
Correct.
let all the board members know what
Very good.
Can I ask
legal
one final
requirements.
question about that?
Yes.
Because I just want to make sure everybody's totally clear about what's happening. So we're going to go through this hearing, and then we'll decide whether we're going to take a vote or not. If the decision was to vote and it was denied, then would that be able to be brought up again at another meeting when Commissioner Mojo is here, or it's just done,
it would be done.
totally done? Okay.
Right, I mean, it'll be up to you guys, based on whatever motions are made. I mean, if a motion to table is made, then that would have to be voted on. If somebody made a motion to move forward with it, you'd have to make that vote or amend if you want to, but that would be, right, but once a vote is if a motion is made and voted on, then that's the.
Thank you. That's what I was certain of, just making sure it's very, very clear.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, you would have, from December 16th, when you received your packets, you would have 60 days to make a decision. So that would bring you to Monday, February 14th, so Valentine's Day.
All right.
So you would have 60 days to make a decision. One other thing is, I think from the applicant's perspective, it might, just something to consider, it might be to the benefit of the applicant to have a full board when making a decision.
All right, well, let's go through the presentation and we can hear from the applicant is here, right? I'm assuming you're Mr. Mortenson? Okay, all right. All right, so let's go forward, Matt, and you can kind of lay this out for us here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. At their November 16th, 2021 meeting, the Planning Commission heard a request from Jeff and Connie Mortenson to rezone an approximately 91-acre parcel. The intent was to rezone an area of the property that was tilled in 2021 and to essentially pursue remove the resource protection biological overlay district, so a interim use permit for a mine could be pursued without the need for an environmental assessment worksheet. And the Planning Commission voted 6-2 to recommend approval of this to the county board. So some background. So the current zoning of the parcel is agricultural general, that's the base zoning district, and then it has 2 overlay zoning districts. It has the resource protection aggregate and the resource protection biological overlay zoning district. So the proposed use, what the applicant would like to use the property for as part of the property for a gravel pit, is currently permitted under the current zoning, just requires that extra level of environmental review because of the nature of the resource protection biological overlay district. The proposed zoning is to remove the resource protection biological overlay on a portion of that parcel, and the proposed use would be permitted as an interim use without an EAW. So it would just be, the parcel would become agricultural general, the base zoning district. The overlay zoning district would be resource protection aggregate. So this is kind of where this is located, in between Ulen and Hitterdal, just to the west. It's along the south side and on the eastern end of Felton Creek. And just some background, in 2018, Summit Sand and Gravel submitted an interim use permit application for a 38-acre gravel pit on the parcel. And then they submitted a draft environmental assessment worksheet shortly after that application. And sometime in May to July, that EAW was reviewed by the county and DNR staff, and they considered that to be incomplete. And then in June 2019, the applicant, so Summit Sand and Gravel, was purchased by Strata. and they met with county staff about revisiting the project. And so staff reviewed that EAW and determined that it had not gone through the proper comment and review procedures per Minnesota rules on public comment and review for environmental assessment worksheets. So Strata indicated that they would not pursue the project, and then in 2021, the applicant and Scott Wirches of Alexandria Sand and Gravel Products met with planning staff about opening a gravel mine on the property. And then I informed them that an EAW is needed to be completed prior to any permit hearing. According to Minnesota rules, if you're going to take an action on a permit, you need to do an EAW first. It needs to be completed before any action's taken. And then I provided them with a copy of the draft EAW that Strata had to give them sort of a starting point on that. So and then July 2021, the landowner tilled and applied Roundup to about 50 acres of the parcel. Some of that was already disturbed, and then some of that was native prairie. And so they met with me again, the landowner and Mr. Wirches, about the project to see if an EAW is still needed because it's no longer native prairie. And I informed them that it was still required because even though the native prairie was tilled up, it's still under that zoning, resource protection biological zoning. And so I'd heard basically that the landowner had stated that if he couldn't, the parcel at the time had additional native prairie on it, and that the applicant said, well, if he couldn't mine it, he was just going to farm the rest of it. So the recommendation based on that information to them at the time was to split the remaining native prairie from the parcel and petition to rezone a portion of it. And so the landowner did that. They subdivided the parcel, as you'll see here in the next slide, and completed a wetland delineation on both parcels, because there are some wetlands on the north end of the parcel, and there wouldn't be any mining allowed in those. So this is kind of, this is the parcel in question here that was disturbed, and then this is the remaining tract.
Which piece does he want to mine?
This one right here, tract A, yep. And so here's some images. This is that remaining tract. So this is basically kind of a before and then after. So we have 3 resource protection districts in Clay County. These are overlay districts. There's the aggregate, biological, and wellhead protection. And so there's a lot of areas in the county where you have these overlay districts and then a base zoning district that are kind of stacked up on top of one another. So when that's the case, it's the zoning district with the most restrictive standards is the one that kind of trumps all the other ones. And so in this case, we have a property that has a resource protection aggregate and a resource protection biological. The resource protection biological standards are more stringent, so that kind of trumps the resource protection aggregate. And so I'll kind of go over some of these zoning districts just to give you all a little background. And I will just say there are extractive use standards for resource protection biological zoning, and it's just requiring an EAW. And so here's a little closer focus on the property. So the red is the area, roughly the area that was disturbed. The gray is areas that were previously disturbed prior to, probably, 40 years ago. The tannish color is called the dry hill prairie. And then the greens are wetlands. And so kind of broke down here by natural community type, what's kind of been disturbed.
Yes.
Commissioner Gailey.
Ask a quick question about
Yeah.
the wetlands. So that dark green area that you were just showing, that is the wetlands. And you said this is a hill, dry hill prairie. So does the wetlands extend to the area where there's going to be runoff, from the land down into the wetlands? Or is it really just this land itself is the wetland? Is it like an area that will affect the wetland or just the wetland itself?
Just looking at the topography out on the property, I don't really think that there is a ton of drainage to those wetlands, though, again, if you had an EAW completed, that's what would tell you that.
Thank you.
That's what would give you that information.
Commissioner Ebinger.
Just quick snapshot on this. Really, the key issue is in this decision whether an EAW has to be conducted or not, as to whether, so the only decision really we have is in order to comply with this, an EAW needs to be conducted, or we can relieve the necessity of that EAW.
I think that should go to Brian.
Mike?
I think ultimately the issue is whether or not we're going to change the ordinance to allow,
The zoning.
or the zoning to allow for part of the parcel to be, I guess, farmed and part of it to be then protected as native prairie, correct?
Would be for part of the parcel to be mined,
Sorry,
essentially.
part of
Yep.
it not to be, yeah, correct.
Yep.
Part of it to be mined and the other part to remain protected.
Yep.
Whether we would allow it to be mined without the EAW. Isn't that what we'd be looking at being removed, correct?
Yep.
And it's
Essentially,
not
that's it.
protected, it can still be used for agricultural purposes with the current
Yes.
overlays.
Commissioner Kelly, that's correct. With the current overlays, really from the county zoning and land use controls are basically on residential, commercial, and industrial development and not agricultural development. There are some consequences to tilling up virgin ground or what could be considered highly erodible land. And that's in terms of getting cut off from any federal funding, subsidies, crop insurance, things like that. And that's a federal thing. But there's nothing at the state or local level. Agricultural would be essentially exempt from this.
Commissioner Ebinger.
If we proceeded with allowing this area to be rezoned for mining without an EAW, would there be the ability to give stipulations on what the land would be returned to? Is there a requirement for rehabilitating subsequent to mining, or is that something that we could make as a stipulation?
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Ebinger, that would be something that would happen in the interim use permit application proceedings determined by the Planning Commission. They could put some stringent conditions on reclamation.
Which is a standard procedure by the Planning Commission.
That is correct, yep. Yep, whoever would be mining would have to post a bond for reclamation and provide a plan for reclamation as well.
And then does that come before the county board or does that stop at the planning commission?
That would stop at the Planning Commission.
Because then it would meet all zoning requirements, but because it's still considered a conditional use, is it?
It's an interim use.
An interim use, and then the interim use then allows for the Planning Commission to put conditions on it.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Do you want to proceed with, do you have any more questions? We can proceed with your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioners Ebinger and Cayley, I think this couple of these next slides are more for your benefit, just to kind of give you a background on some of these zoning districts, what their purpose is, when they were created, things like that. So I'll start with the Resource Protection Biological Overlay Zoning District. So the purpose of this district is essentially, as it's named, to protect areas with biologically significant habitat. And this was done as part of a project that the DNR did in the late 80s to early to mid 90s. It was called the County Biological Survey. And so they went basically to every county in the state of Minnesota and did surveys for significant biological resources. And so on this, Mr. Mortenson's property did some research and got the old survey notes, and the previous property owner was looking at it, looking at getting a native prairie tax exemption. So he had the DNR come out to assess his prairie at the time, and that was in 1988, I believe. And so that's when this property was surveyed, and it's been subsequently surveyed, not from an on-the-ground survey, but just from aerial photo interpretation, satellite imagery, things like that. And at the time in the 80s when they surveyed it, they did note that it was a heavily grazed parcel. There were some disturbed areas, but they also said that there's lots of pockets of very high quality prairie as well. And so how this zoning district kind of ties in with our comprehensive plan is we have a goal in our current comprehensive plan to identify, protect, preserve the county's high quality natural, scenic, cultural, and open space areas. And the policy under that goal would be to balance the preservation of native prairie areas with the mining of the county's gravel resources. And so just a little background on Prairie in Clay County. Back when they were doing the public land survey system, when they were surveying every section and corner and quarter of the county, they took very detailed notes on the vegetation in everywhere, basically, in the United States. And someone, I can't remember his name, he made a map for the entire state of Minnesota based on these surveyor notes. And so in Clay County, pre-settlement, so this would be in probably the early 1800s, there was approximately 620,000 acres of native prairie in Clay County. So that's 92% of the county. The remnant prairie today is about 20,598 acres, so that's about 3% remaining. And now on Mr. Mortenson's property is remnant dry hill prairie, so this is a very rare type of prairie. There's 330 acres, and so after the kind of the disturbance, there's approximately there's 330 acres of dry hill prairie in Clay County. 116 of those happen to be on Mr. Mortenson's property, and the biological survey biodiversity rating for the parcel is high. It's the second highest category given by the state. There's outstanding, high, moderate, and low.
Commissioner Cayley.
Quick question about this biological overlay district. How large is the district? What does it cover? Does it correlate to this map that you were just showing at all, or?
I would say that it correlates roughly to the green on this map, and then also
That light green?
kind of the highlighter green, yeah.
Lime.
Lime green. And even beyond that. So because it's not just prairie, there's some in the southeast part of the county, there's woodlands and things like that, that were once part of what's called the big woods. And so we do have some big woods in our county, in the southeast part of the county. And this, just a little bit more information about all of the resource protection zoning overlay districts, not just resource protection biological. These were adopted in 2005 there was an ordinance update, so an update to the Clay County Development Code, and then there was a zoning map update that occurred. And I believe that went forward to the Planning Commission in June 29th, 2005. The county board heard it in July 14th of 2005. And then they officially adopted a new zoning map in December 20th of 2005. And so because there was a wholesale change to the zoning map. That just went through the kind of the public notice procedures for that. It went into the paper. There were public hearings. It did not get, individual landowners weren't noticed, just because you would have to send a notice to every single resident in the county for this. And state statute does not require that. They just require a notice in the paper. So that's kind of where, that's the origin and the genesis of these zoning overlay districts.
So when the notices went out to when it was adopted, what was that length of time? Several months?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's at least 3 opportunities to be heard.
Thank you.
And at the time this was the overlay was placed, Mr. Mortenson was the owner?
No.
I believe his father was the owner.
Okay.
Or he was the owner.
Or you were the, okay.
Okay, yep. All right.
But no owner received individual notification of the change.
That is correct. Just looking back in our records, it looks like every paper in the county did get a notice that was printed. So not just the form, but every paper in the county.
Okay.
All right, so just looking at the biological zoning on, or from the county biological survey, there's essentially 3, I guess you would call, communities on this particular parcel. There's disturbed land, which is about 12 acres. There's the dry prairie, which is about 57 acres, and then there's this wetland area, which is about 21 acres. So that was the reasoning for having the resource protection biological zoning on this property, and then properties to the north as well. Now moving on to the aggregate, resource protection aggregate overlay zoning district. So the purpose of this overlay zoning district is to protect areas with existing significant aggregate resources. And that was accomplished through the Clay County Aggregate Resources Inventory. And so again, the DNR, they're Department of Natural Resources, you think of birds and butterflies and plants and all that. Well, they also have a minerals division. And so they're also looking at being stewards of our mineral and non-mineral resources as well. And so they have done and are still in the process of doing, we're fortunate that we had this done in our county, not every county has this, is they did an aggregate resources inventory and mapping project, and that was focused on the Agassiz Beach Ridge kind of running along the center of the county, and then glacial deposits to the east. And so this is kind of what that looks like. So based on this, there's an estimated 47,796 acres that have a high or moderate aggregate potential. And so the areas that are high are those areas in orange, and then there's areas in blue that have moderate. And the amount is probably much higher just because of study limitations. And I should have mentioned this for like native prairie, the amount is probably much higher too because of study limitations. But a lot of our aggregate resources are kind of in the north central part of the county and then the southeast part of the county as well. And then we have an active gravel mines in Clay County. We have 64 active mines in Clay County right now. A lot of them you can see follow that aggregate potential map kind of almost to a T. Southeast part of the county and then spanning north. And then we've got a couple right here in this area. And so we just taken a closer look kind of at the northeast part of the county, looking at kind of the area. This is kind of roughly the area in between Keene and Goose Prairie, where Mr. Mortenson's property is. So there's a lot of gravel activity here. I think there's probably 4 mines within a half mile. So the Planning Commission did receive some comments from several nearby residents, some residents in Goose Prairie. They're just concerned about the loss of native prairie, impacts to adjacent ag land, and potential for another gravel pit in the township. Goose Prairie Township did meet on this. They don't have a position. They didn't take a position.
The town board did.
The town board did not. Yep. The DNR did provide a letter with comments. And just to give you a overview of those comments is, the Dry Hill Prairie is an imperiled plant community. Nearby Felton Creek is a protected trout stream, so that means that any mining that would occur near Felton Creek, they have to submit some kind of plan through to the DNR to make sure that there aren't any impacts to Felton Creek.
And going to earlier questions that were asked, if they had the opportunity to apply for a mining permit, the Felton Creek issue would be taken care of through conditions.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Yep. They also mentioned a potential for cumulative impacts associated with gravel mining in this area. Sometimes when you have these several gravel pits that are permitted as separate projects within a close vicinity to one another, they kind of there's a danger of them becoming what they're called super pits or mega pits, because you just have all this activity concentrated in one area, and eventually through permitting and variances and things like that, they sometimes become one giant pit. And then they did cite that goal in our comprehensive plan and the policy that I referred to earlier about balancing native prairie with aggregate mining resources. They seem to suggest that there are better sites for aggregate extraction in the county that do not impact native prairie.
Yes, Commissioner Cayley.
So I grew up in the country, but I did not grow up on a farm. One of those letters referenced possible impacts to surrounding farming. What would those impacts be? Or agriculture, I should say, more broadly.
That is an interesting one, just because there wasn't any specific examples given, and I personally have not received many complaints from any conflicts between farmers and gravel pits before in the past, beyond issues with roads and road maintenance.
And then with the roads, is that just heavy truck traffic impacting the maintenance, and then dust, I would assume.
Yep, dust, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Cayley, yeah, dust and maintenance are the big ones.
And that, this particular site, if I can follow up to your question, is this particular site, what are the roads around it? Are they township roads or are they county roads?
Mr. Chair, it's county road. It'd be County Highway 37, I believe. So it's a paved road.
It is a paved road?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a very nice road.
And so and that would be built to 10-10 standard, I'm assuming?
I believe
Paved
so.
roads, I think most of our county roads are.
I believe so.
10-10 standard.
Yep.
And then if it were a township road, then that might or not be a reason why a township would also weigh in with a concern.
Yes.
Regarding the roads.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay.
Can I ask one more follow-up
Yes,
to that?
sure, yes.
So with gravel, the gravel industry, then there is a gravel tax, right?
Yes.
And then does some of that go towards maintenance of the roads, and how does that work if it's a county road? If there were major impacts from a.
Yeah, so the disbursement of gravel tax is quite complicated. We could probably have a little seminar on that all by itself, I think. But I believe there are portions of it that the county gets to retain, and there's a portion of it that goes to townships. So I think it's a good question that deserves a better answer than what I probably want to give us
Mr.
during this
Overbaugh.
hearing. Yeah, well, we could have Dave give us I know Commissioner Gross has asked several times too about the gravel tax issue and how that's distributed, and maybe we need to have a little gravel tax 101 here at some
Yeah.
point in time for us, but,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Kayla, it'd be good to get probably myself and the auditor's office and the highway department involved.
Yes.
We can provide information
Yeah.
for you on gravel taxes. And, Mr. Chair, one thing I'll say is in between the planning commission meeting and the hearing today, I have not received any comments from anyone, besides the township saying that they met and they don't have a position.
So they're just remaining neutral.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
So some considerations for this rezoning is removing that resource protection biological zoning overlay district for the purpose of permitting a gravel mine without an EW. It could set a precedent that could impact other areas with native prairie and aggregate resources. Although I don't say precedent in the legal sense, because with these types of decisions being quasi judicial, there really isn't you take everything on an individual case-by-case basis. And so you're not looking back on previous decisions also.
He could, if the biological resource protection area was lifted from his property, it doesn't mean that, I mean, he could be doing it for other reasons rather than a mining operation.
Yes, that is correct. It could be that it got put on a property that's maybe has been a residential, or it could be something that's been farmed for.
The reason I bring that up is strictly for what you just said.
Yep.
I don't know that it would be setting a precedent.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, because we don't know what ultimately, he's requesting that it be removed. He went through the planning commission process to do that. He's also indicated that if he doesn't do a mining, that he just might simply do ag.
Yeah, that is
which is legal in itself.
Yep. Yep.
So I guess I take precedent seriously on a lot of things, but also there's times when you do have to do it on an individual request.
Yep.
So, okay.
The landowner already does kind of have an option that he could apply for an interim use permit under current zoning with a completed EAW. I will say, though, that with this option, I think the landowner did try and do this 3 years ago, and it just never got to the finish line. It was just never completed. So I think that's something to consider too, that the landowner has invested some time and probably some money into this as well already with an EAW that just never, for whatever reason, was never completed. So the remaining native prairie on the parcel and the adjacent parcel could be converted to an agricultural use by the landowner, and that would result in further loss of that prairie. And that, as I mentioned before, the only enforcement mechanism for that is the Federal Sodbuster Act, which basically restricts federal farm subsidies to landowners who convert highly erodible land that has not been plowed to ag use. And so that's kind of out of our scope here.
So if I can go to that third bullet point and ask a question about during the planning commission hearing process, was there, so the intended area that's going to be, that he's planning on mining, and we'll give the applicant a chance here in a little bit to speak to, but was there any discussion about the approval of that? Because it seems to me the intent was the disturbed area, they were according to the planning commission, the motion was to allow the rezoning to occur on that disturbed area. Is that correct?
Yes, that was one of the things that was discussed.
And so was, but it's not until the permit application process where they could put some additional restrictions that would protect the remaining land. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
So there could be an agreement that would state that, okay, you're gonna mine this, but the native prairie that's there now, we want that to stay native prairie. Is that an option?
Yes, that would be an option. And in my conversations with the applicant, he's seemed open to that. Is mining a portion of the property and then maybe putting the remainder, and then the other parcel as well into some sort of protection.
Yeah, I guess going to.
So they were looking for a compromise.
I guess going to that bullet point number 3.
Yep.
The landowner has every right to turn that to ag.
That is correct.
Based on current county ordinances.
That is correct, yes.
So if we want to try to do our best to still protect some portion of native prairie, this might be an opportunity to do that as well.
Yep, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, I just want to point that out. Just in reviewing all of these different options,
Yep. And Mr. Chair, that's kind of the option that I had discussed with the landowner and then the Mr. Wirches from Alexandria Gravel Products too, who has I believe has a lease on the property, is to work out some sort of compromise where Mr. Mortenson can have a gravel mine, and then also that at the same time the public gets the benefit of protecting that remainder.
the remaining native prairie.
Yes.
Right. Okay, that answers my questions on that, okay? You can continue, I didn't.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay.
So, to kind of guide this decision, in the Clay County Development Code, there's a set of criteria and general review standards. There's 2, but then number 2 has an additional 5 review standards to consider. And so the Planning Commission kind of went through these and discussed them. And that's where that serves as the basis of their motion to recommend approval, which passed 6-2. There were considerable discussions on a couple of these. One being 2C, if this is consistent with the ordinance, and that is the rezoning is consistent with the purposes of this ordinance and the purposes of the zoning district in which the applicant seeks classification. There is conversation about that the development code already has that process for mining in this zoning district, and that's completing an EAW. And then there's also some significant discussion on 2D, which is conflict with the comprehensive plan. The rezoning is not in conflict with the comprehensive plans of any township or city of the county or the county land use plan. And kind of the main topic was that the county comprehensive plan identifies biological and aggregate resources as important, and that there's not a lot of native prairie left in the county, and other areas might be more appropriate for aggregate extraction. There was also discussion too, I think this is what kind of caused them to make this finding in exactly the conversation that we had, or the point that you just brought up, being that while there is a significant amount of native prairie on Mr. Mortenson's property that remains, that could be protected. And it would be
Or it could all be gone.
Or it could all be gone. And that would essentially be that compromise could be considered to be a balancing, allowing the development of an aggregate resource extraction at the same time protecting that native prairie.
Commissioner Ebinger.
And again, part of that conversation could be restoration of the area that's already been disturbed post-mining. Is it possible to restore it to a dry hill prairie, or is it just simply restore it to where
I'm not a prairie expert or prairie plant expert, but I would say that based on restoration sites that I've seen of former gravel mines in the county, it would be expensive and very difficult, and it would require several years of post-mining management and maintenance. But that might be something that, when that mine is exhausted, that a organization like the Nature Conservancy or Pheasants Forever might be
Willing to go in and do that.
Yep.
But this would all be part of the discussion by the commission, planning commission, and planning staff before before mining permit would be
Yes.
issued.
Yep.
Reclamation is a standard discussion regarding gravel.
Yep. That's correct, Mr. Chair. Yep.
All right. Does that kind of wrap up your presentation?
Yes, and one thing I was talking with Mr. Melton about is, if you do feel like you need to go through your own findings, I do have copies of these review standards for all of you. So, it might be appropriate if you want on a decision like this to go through your own findings. I think it's up to you.
Do the findings happen after the hearing is closed?
Yes.
Okay, there we go, okay. So I guess at this point, to move this along, we have the applicant here. I think we need to allow him an opportunity. Mr. Mortenson, if you'd like to come up and I think in the record here, you're Jeff, right?
Yeah, I'm Jeff.
Okay, good morning, Jeff. So you've kind of heard the presentation. We've got this document here. Is there any information or any questions you have on the presentation, or do you have any additional information you'd like to provide to us? And keep in mind that even though Commissioner Moser was not here today, if we decide to wait for her, she will have an opportunity to review this entire video of this hearing, so.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it all started quite a while ago, like 5-6 years ago, when we tried to get the gravel pit to begin with Summit, Basically, I bought this property back in 1995, and 96, I basically got offered 5 times what I paid for the land from a gravel guy. So I knew there was gravel there a long time ago. But we didn't really pursue it till probably 5 years ago. Okay, to make a long story short. And then we found out it was all this overlay stuff that I don't really understand or any of that, So we had to do an EAW. Well, that's what happened with the whole gravel pit, why it all got to a standstill, because it was going to cost $80,000 to do an EAW and 3 years to complete it. So nobody wanted to spend the money to do it. So they just moved down the road from my place, and I think they've opened up 5 or 6, 7 gravel pits in the last 2 years, in my area, which that could have been that could have been on my property if this overlay wasn't there. That I had no idea it was even there. It wasn't there when I bought the property. It's kind of a complicated deal, and it's kind of not fair for my family and retirement and all this stuff coming up. So we're just trying to get it worked through, whatever we can do to get it passed. I've went through a lot of steps in the last 5 years to try to accommodate Matt and, not Matt, I think the guy who was there before Matt. Tim Magnuson. Yeah, he, I don't know, he didn't really do much with it, but I don't know, it's just frustrating. The whole thing's been frustrating.
So,
Trying to get it done.
So Jeff, you've heard the conversation and you kind of know the concerns regarding native prairie and that there's, and we talked a little bit about potential compromise.
Well, I
From your
guess
standpoint, would you be open?
I'd be open to that, but I'm not gonna say it's never gonna be disturbed in my lifetime, or my kid's lifetime. I wouldn't be willing to do that.
Okay.
I mean, why should I? It wasn't there when I bought it. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be fair to my family, in my eyes. Who knows, 10 years down the road, I might wanna make a hunting preserve out there, or big woods. I might plant 50 acres of trees. I'm an avid hunter. Shot a record buck down there this year. 177 and 6/8. Big boy. But I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I'm just,
Kinda like I got-
just asking you the question. That's,
My land got stole from me, is what it did, in my mind.
okay. Commissioner,
Or maybe they could offer me a bunch of money to keep it in there. That's never been brought up by anybody.
Commissioner Kaylee.
Okay, I have a couple questions about the EAW, and then I
Yeah.
want to address what you just said there. Matt, in the beginning of your presentation, you said that the EAW was essentially completed except for the public comment and review period, and that's why it wasn't considered finished. Is that correct, or was I misunderstanding?
That was my understanding. I know that a engineering consulting firm that does EAWs, they're currently doing an EAW for the county right now. And the county is in a similar situation to Mr. Mortenson, and we are going through the EAW process on that. And there would, that company's review of the EAW thought it would be more incomplete than just that.
Okay. I did watch the planning commission hearing a couple times to make sure that that I had understood the conversation that happened there, as well as this presentation today. But my other question about the EAW is who is responsible for paying for that? Because it can be quite expensive, as you've noted.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kaylee, that would be the project proposer. So more often than not, it is for gravel pits, it's the company that's ultimately going to be doing the gravel extraction.
So it could be Mr. Mortenson, but generally it is the gravel company.
Yes, that is correct. And that's why I think they've walked away from it, is because there's other areas in the county where you can extract gravel because there's not native prairie on the property. And you don't need to do an EAW.
So this is the third gravel company that you've worked with, is that correct, Mr. Mortenson?
Yes. I've had two-year contracts.
Two two-year contracts, and this current lease that you have with Alexandria Gravel, is that a 2-year?
3-year deal, I think.
3-year? I'm concerned that even if we remove this overlay, an EAW could still be required. Is this third company gonna walk away from you as well?
I guess I don't understand why it would have to be done, because there's nothing to study. It's a black field.
My understanding from watching the planning commission meeting was that an EAW could still be required, and that there was another process where citizens could petition, and perhaps only 100 Minnesota residents were necessary for that petition to require an EAW.
Yeah,
still
Mr.
accurate?
Chair, Commissioners, there's mandatory EAWs, which if a project triggers a certain threshold of size or whatever, then there'd be a proposer initiated. A proposed project proposer could just decide, oh, I want to do an EAW. Then there is the RGU, the responsible government unit, could also decide. So say the planning commission could say, we're not going to take action on a permit until you do an EAW. We need more information. And then the the fourth would be the citizen petition, which is 100 citizens. They don't have to live in Clay County. They can live anywhere in the state. And it's not as simple as, I don't think, just getting signatures. I think that it's more of a complicated process than that. They have to state why they're doing this. You know, it's not just signing a paper and I got 100 signatures that we don't want this. There has to be, or that we think this should have an EAW. There has to be specific reasons why.
Okay. And then to get to what Mr. Morton just said at the end of his comments there about being offered money for preserving the prairie. In the Planning Commission meeting that I watched, I thought it was mentioned that the Nature Conservancy had reached out with an offer to purchase land, or was that inaccurate?
That I'm not sure of.
Not my land, no.
Not your land? Okay. So there have been no offers to just purchase the land for prairie
No.
preservation? Okay. One last, sorry, I have a million questions.
That's quite all right.
And the portion of disturbed land, there was an area that wasn't disked, maybe because of the topography. Was that herbicide applied to that area as well? So essentially that prairie plants are gone.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'll say just because something's tilled and sprayed doesn't mean that there isn't a viable prairie seed bank in the soil, which, I mean, a year or two after that happening, it can come back.
Okay, but it was majorly impacted, we'll say
Yes.
that. Okay.
Commissioner Evinger.
Ms. Mortenson, just to clarify, you do not have an interest in compromising on remaining prairie?
Well, like I
If
said,
the-
we could leave it in there for now,
Well,
say some time down the road, I have no idea.
in perpetuity is probably what would generally be the standard, wouldn't it?
It would depend on the type of program that Mr. Mortenson would want to enroll it in. I mean, if he wanted to do CRP or CREP or something like that, it could be a 10, 20-year contract. Perpetuity is an option. He could sell that other tract if he so chose. Yeah, there's options for that.
Are you open those options, sir?
CRP, you gotta dig up and plant CRP seed in there. What would that do? That'd defeat the purpose.
Well, you already basically have native prairie on your remaining tract,
No,
so.
I'm talking about if you wanna put the rest into CRP, you'd have to dig it up. Right? You don't wanna dig it up. You don't wanna disturb the rest.
Yeah, you could put it in,
I don't wanna do anything with it, I just wanna leave it the way it is right now.
perfect,
I'm not
yeah.
interested in any program, no, I don't wanna put it in any CRP or nothing like that.
The current native prairie?
Yeah,
I mean, he could put it into a program with the state where he can get a tax exemption on it. Essentially, he wouldn't pay any taxes on that.
All right.
I didn't know there was any overlay on it until 5 years ago, and I've owned it for 26 years. It's pretty sad, actually.
And that goes to the fact that there were no individual landowners who were notified of that
Right.
change that had happened in 2005. The fact that it's put in every paper, I myself right now don't subscribe to any papers,
I don't read the newspaper, never have.
so that does,
I just think I don't know, it's kind of an unfair deal.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back, every gravel pit in the world was native prairie at one time. You know what I'm saying? Every one of them gravel pits around there was native prairie. at one point.
But I guess the response to that was, well, yes, that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but right now, there's not a lot of native prairie left.
Right. I didn't realize I had any either until 5 years ago. I don't want any. Unless someone wants to pay me for it, or I want to, you know, do what I want to do with my land. I don't know how that can even happen. It's not fair.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Kaylee.
So Mr. Mortenson, if, let's say there was a vote and the overlay district was not removed, what are your intentions? What's going to happen with this lease with Alexandria Gravel?
I guess I'm going to have to hire a lawyer, yes. If none of this gets corrected, because I was never notified. Didn't know nothing about it. I'm trying to, you know, I mean, I'd probably have to do a lawsuit against the county or something. I don't know what I'm gonna have to do here.
Matt, in your,
I lost revenue for the last 5 years, for sure.
in your discussions with, I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman at Alexandria Gravel.
Scott Wirchis.
Scott Wirchis.
Yep.
Did it seem like they would be willing to pursue finishing that EAW to get this pit in place?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kaylee, I would have to talk to him again about that, but I would think that an EAW would be less expensive than hiring an attorney.
Yeah.
But I don't have the county paying for it. Like you guys, you know what I'm saying? It's a personal deal. Like you said, you're doing it with the county, but who's gonna pay for that? Your EAW that you're doing over there at the county pit.
The county is paying for it.
County's paying for it. And that's me, right?
The county is the landowner, is it not?
Yes.
So the landowner's paying for it.
And the county also benefits from that gravel too, so
Yep.
there's a.
And Mr. Chair, typically the landowner is not paying for an EAW. It's typically the project proposer.
Right, but in this case, the EAW is too expensive for any gravel pit to do it.
Then how are other surrounding gravel pits being opened?
They didn't have to do it. Because theirs wasn't zoned into that. They didn't have,
The overlay wasn't there.
they didn't put an overlay on their land.
So is Mr. Mortenson's land just inside of that overlay district? Because you indicated that there were 4 gravel pits within a half mile?
There's 4, and the rest of them within a half mile. And on those properties, they had been row crop, you know, or heavily grazed, or, you know, they don't have native prairie on them.
Okay. So they were
Native prairie is
agricultural.
very fragmented, so, yep.
All right. Do we have anything else we want entered into the public hearing record?
Oh, I've got some questions if we.
Sure, yes.
Before we close.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Gross.
Since we're doing EAW, why does there have to be another one then? You said something about the county zone and EAW?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gross, it's a separate EAW, separate project.
Okay. I was just thinking, even if he does do the gravel and we're concerned about native grass, when they're done with the gravel pit, which may be 2 years, 4 years, they have to restore it anyway to natural, to what it was before, wasn't it? Wouldn't they have to do that?
Mr. Chair, not necessarily. It wouldn't have to be, it could be restored to landowner specifications. If that was the condition. the planning commission could put the condition on there that it would be restored to a native, to Prairie. But they could also say you could plant alfalfa.
Okay. And also, so, I mean, we were talking about the loss, and someone's mentioned the loss of native prairie. I mean, yes, that probably could happen, but there's no one up there I know of. I don't know, probably you could tell me, is anybody up there looking at that native prairie and saying how nice that is? Or is there any problem with losing some more native prairie? Other than we're keeping track of it, yeah, now we got another 2% less. I mean, what's the problem with that?
Plus, you got cows in there and it's only about this long, all summer long. There ain't no prairie out there. It's a pasture. It's
Okay.
this long, the grass.
Thank you. All right, no other question.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Commissioner Kaylee.
I did have a question, and I was hoping that it would come back to my head before. Gravel pits. What is the lifespan of a gravel pit generally in that area? Like, is this a retirement plan where this goes on for 20 years and you receive an income steadily, or is it just a few years? How does that work?
I think the plan is long-term, because the one across the fence was started probably 15 years ago, and they probably mined out 11, 12 acres so far. You know, just to give you a rough idea of how, you know, this area here could be 20-plus years of, you know, obviously they'd only do 10, 20 acres, then they'd, you know, reclaim it, you know, and move over, you know what I mean?
So the,
There's like 50, 60 acres, but you can only start with, what, 30, 38 acres, roughly?
And typically, Commissioner Keeley, I think, Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically the duration of a mining field is established in the conditions, is it not?
Yep, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kaylee, that's correct. And typically, it depends on, I mean, every situation's a little bit unique, but anywhere from 10 to 15 years is pretty typical.
I think the last one that I was there for, I think it was a 10 or a 15 year
Yep, that's correct. I think
condition that was put on a.
and then I assume there's also depth conditions having to do with the water table and things like that as well, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kaylee, that's correct. In an area like this where the water table isn't very high anyway, but it's close to that protected trout stream, there would probably be a condition that required a vertical buffer between the floor of the mine and the water table.
Is that okay? All right, anything else, any other thing we need put before the record of the public hearing? We have a motion to close the hearing.
Move to approve closing the hearing.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kaylee, second by Commissioner Edminger to close the hearing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, motion carried. And Matt, you said now that we, basically, the board has till sometime early February to actually comment on this, I think.
Yep. Yeah, Mr. Chair, February 14th.
Okay. Looking at a calendar. So, Brian, I'm looking at you. If we were to table a decision on this, do we need to table it to a specific date? Is that correct?
I think, right, you could do either, but, I mean, I think, there's either a tabling to a specific date, or you can actually table it, and then determine what date that is. I think you'd be better off doing it to a specific date to allow the landowner to know when that is and when he could be back here, when it would actually be addressed. So I think the rules, if you look at Robert's rules, allows for either.
Okay. And I guess, you know, and I know Commissioner Mojo is our voting delegate on the Planning Commission. I see that she had supported this at the Planning Commission level. She isn't here today to, you know, but I mean, she obviously, when you're dealing with a 4/5 vote, I certainly believe it's appropriate to wait for all 5 board members.
Agreed.
If I was the one absent, I would probably want to be able to have my voice heard as well, especially when it's not a simple majority issue that we have. So if it's, unless there's some board member who's willing to make a motion today, I would suggest that we look at tabling this until either January 11th or January 18th. Commissioner Ebinger.
I move we table this till January 11th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table till January 11th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right. So we're basically waiting till we have all 5 of us here, and the reason I picked the 11th is the 4th, we have a lot of start of the year stuff that we have to deal with, so, all right. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Let's take a quick 5-minute recess, please. And those of you who were already delayed, sorry for this, but we'll get back to you here. Try to catch up on our time. All right, we are back in session here. We took what was a 5-minute break, and then we had another break. We had a water line break in the building, so we had our fire alarms go off, so that delayed us a little bit further. So we are back in session now. We are on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is a request for approval for resolution 2021-56 for SCORE. And that is regarding recycling and environment funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This should be fairly quick.
Do you want me to introduce you first, or do you just?
I think everybody knows me, don't they?
Kirk.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman. What this is about here, and this is a issue that is pretty near and dear to Mr. Chair here. It's also near and dear to me as well. Essentially, what's going on is that there's what they call a SCORE, a solid waste tax. The solid waste tax essentially funds 25% of the amount of money goes to the general fund, and then about 70% of it goes to excuse me, the Pollution Control Agency, and they use that for environmental programs. And then the counties get the balance, which is a minimal amount. What this resolution is asking the legislature to do this year is to take the money that's going into the general fund and put it all towards environmental programs. And hopefully the county can get more share. Just for an example, we only get $186,000 a year from the state for SCORE funding. And just as a small example, we last year we budgeted $421,000 that we give to the cities alone. So
And we get how much?
Pardon me? And we get $186,000. So this would do an awful lot to help us out. And, you know, I think that a lot of other counties around the state feel the same way. So what I'm asking you to do is pass this resolution. We're going to be spearheading other counties in the state to also be passing this resolution, and hopefully we can get this squared away this year. So with that, I'd stand to answer any questions you may all have.
So, Kirk, you had mentioned that we're asking for, in this resolution, we're asking for all those funds to be restored to SCORE. This resolution doesn't really state that. This resolution states that Clay County supports the state funding by increased SCORE funding. So maybe not necessarily all of it, but we want to see additional funding that goes to SCORE.
That's right, Mr. Chair.
And then the other thing that, on that last be it resolved, when I was reading through this, it says Clay County supports the state funding by increased score in parens Select Committee on Recycling and the Environment grants in amounts which fully utilize the solid waste management tax revenues for solid waste reduction or management activities. Nowhere in our resolution here does it state our only concerns about improving the environment. Because what we do by recycling is improve the environment.
That's exactly right, Mr.
And
Chair.
so, you know, I mean, if this is early on in its form, I had just penciled in here, based on what you have there, Kirk, was in amounts which fully utilize the solid waste management tax revenues for solid waste reduction, comma, management activities, and improving our environment. Because those two other things would do that. They would help to improve our environment. So I just, if it's not too late to do that, I would.
No, we're going to be we're the first ones in the state to pass this resolution, so it's not too late. And I think that helps improve the resolution as well.
What's the board's thoughts? Commissioner Ebinger.
Do we need, what I'm hearing is we need to include that in the resolution.
I'm only suggesting that we include it. I just think if we're going to put a resolution to the legislature, including the definition that what we're doing helps improve the environment, would go a long way in helping what we're asking for.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-56 with the inclusion of that these actions are, these requests are being made to have a positive impact on the environment.
Okay.
Second.
You have a motion by Commissioner Ebinger, second by Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right, thank you, Kirk.
Very good. Thank you much.
So instead of us getting 18 million, maybe we can get 36 million.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Well, that's what we're shooting for.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have a budget discussion consideration to adopt final levy for 22 budget. Steve.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and I would note we do have Lori Johnson also online on Teams for any questions for her. Today, we're here this morning, what we hope is a culmination of a great deal of work that we've gone through in the budget process for the last roughly 6 months. Departments have completed their proposed budgets. We've had different county partners submit their financial requests of support and all presented before you earlier this year in July and August. When the board compiled the initial budgets process, we were just over 13% of a levy request, which we were encouraged to go back and sharpen our pencils and get that number down. After the direction from this board and multiple adjustments, this board approved Resolution 2021-43, setting a preliminary levy on September 21st at 4.3%. With the expectation, this board shared that there's an expectation that we would continue to look at lowering that by the time we are here today. With the capital investment bond, a 5% reduction in insurance premiums, continued higher than planned sales tax, we were able to divert some funds from the levy and to impact the budget in a positive way. On November 30th, during a budget update in preparation of our truth and taxation, the board again encouraged us to take another look in hopes of getting that levy below 4.3. On December 14th, the TNT truth and taxation presentation was provided based on that 4.3 preliminary levy at the end. I presented some additional opportunities working with Lori Johnson and some of our department heads. like the sheriff's office, the VSO insurance savings, removing the Chamber Ignite program from the levy, and utilizing an additional $130,000 in fund balance. We were able to absorb the increase that this board took actions on in adjusting the corrections officers' pay grid, all with bringing the proposed levy down to 3.82% for 2022. At the end of that meeting, of Truth and Taxation, this board asked Lori to bring forward a resolution for potential approval today. This morning, we have two items before you for your consideration. The first item is the total budget, 2022 total budget, which this year is $100,091,536. I think it's important for our citizens to understand that's not the levy dollar. The state and federal government have programs that the county carries out on their behalf, and so that would be our total budget. The second item up for your consideration is Resolution 2021-57. This resolution would set the amount of dollars that we'd be requesting from the Clay County taxpayers. That proposed levy amount, again, is $38,538,479, or again, a 3.82% increase over the 2021 budget. And with that, I would yield for any questions and would be looking for a proposed motion on two separate motions on those items.
Okay, the first motion is what?
The first motion would be the total budget, total 2022 budget of $100,091,091,536.
Does that include, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago on the men's program. We haven't settled that yet, have we? Or is there money there to cover that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gross, that does not. At this point, we're under contract with MEND through October of this year, and so that, of next year, excuse me. And so that,
okay.
that does factor in their budget through then.
Thank you.
So I'm seeing here we have one resolution to pass.
Correct.
And that is the levy, is the resolution.
Yes.
The other one is just adopting.
Adopting the total budget. So we have one resolution and one motion to adopt the total budget.
All right. Commissioner Ebinger.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2021-57.
We want to do the total budget.
Oh, total budget first? Okay. We approve the total budget in the amount of $100,091,536.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ebinger, second by Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion on the total budget? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Now we can move on to the adoption, or there's resolution 2021-57.
Mr. Chair, I will move that we adopt Resolution 2021-57.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Cayley, second by Commissioner Gross. Discussion. I have a little bit. So again, we're adopting the net of 3.82, is that correct?
3.82, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And that includes using fund balances of 300,000.
That's correct.
Do we know what our, so this is from 2021?
That is correct, yes.
And based on our audit that we had yesterday, that number is about 1.6 million.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I would note in having discussion, as I anticipated you may have this question, of that 1.652 million, roughly $1,274,738 can be attributed to CARES. And so that left a remainder of $377,312, of which this budget has $300,000 of that in the proposed levy.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, because I think we're going to find that we're significantly, well, that's for 2021, I guess, but I'm not going to vote for this levy. I'm not going to vote for it because we are talking about levying for 2022 using our proposed 2021 as a base. And nowhere in there is actual. So our audit that I just spoke of was from 2020. Had a $1.6 million revenues over expenditures. We haven't even talked about what the revenues over expenditures are going to be for 2021.
No, that's correct, Mr. Chair. If you recall, for the 2021 budget, of that $1.6 million, we utilized roughly $1.2 million of that to pay down the levy for 2021. And that's generally been your practice of utilize, once we find out what that is, of determining what dollar amount you want to use for that following budget.
Okay. I'll leave that for debate for later, but when we do a levy, included in our budget process, we set aside money that goes into a savings account, better known as internal service fund, to help cover things. So it's money set aside already within our budget. And when we run into excesses, for example, the 2022 budget, right now as it's proposed, a spread levy of $38,538,000. If we end up not spending $2 million of that, where's that going to go?
Go into our reserve fund, Mr. Chair.
It's going to go into reserve, and then we're still in 2023. We're still going to compare our 2023 levy to the proposed 2022.
There may be some other things.
So can you imagine now if we had 2 million less, or 1.5 million, or 1 million even, because what is it, about $250,000 represents 1%?
This year it's about 367,000.
367,000. Okay, so, 2% would be $700,000. So I appreciate, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to vote for this levy because I dispute any spending. I've supported everything that we're spending. What I don't support is what we're asking our taxpayers to pay based on previous year's information. So that's my vote, and I'm pointing out why. So, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Aye. That would be me. Motion carried. All right, we'll move on to, and by the way, that's the first time I haven't voted for a final budget, so. All right, next we have request of approval for year-end items, Human Resources Coordinator Anna. Good morning. Almost afternoon here, the way things are going.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm here on behalf of Darren this morning to discuss 4 year-end items. Those items would be approval of the 2022 grid, meal reimbursements per diem, as well as the IRS mileage reimbursement. Do we need approval for individually for each one?
I believe we have done that in the
Okay,
past.
so I'll start with the 2022 grid. The budget that was just approved included a 2% COLA for all employees starting January 1st. So that would be the first item. I do not have a grid here today, but if you need that, we can certainly pull it up.
And if I can just point out too, that all these items, Darren did present these to our PIC committee meeting. And if you recall, there was actually a recommendation to approve all of them, including item number 5, but there's since been some clarifications made to the furlough thing that requires some more. So we've kind of asked that be removed from a decision today. So, but these items 1 through 4 do come with the recommendation of PIC.
Thank you. So yes, the first item then would be the grid approval for 2022.
I will move to approve grid adjustments for 2022.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Kaylee, second by Commissioner Agnew. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Next is meal reimbursement rates.
The meal reimbursement rates for 2022 remain unchanged.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Item number 3, per diem rates.
The per diem rates remain unchanged for 2022.
Move to approve per diem rates.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kaylee, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. And lastly, the IRS mileage rate increase.
Yes, the last item would be the IRS mileage rate for 2022. That was actually just released over the weekend, and so there is a 2.5% increase to the mileage rate for 2022, bringing per mile to 58.5 cents.
I think that our motion on that is to establish the federal rate, IRS rate. So that can change mid-year if they so choose. So typically, our motion would be to establish the federal reimbursement rate.
So move.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Ebinger. All in favor, or excuse me, any further discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. And item number 5, the furlough program, that's been asked to go back for some clarification to PIC, and then we'll come back to this group.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. All right. Next, we have a request permission to move forward with courthouse floor project. Joe, now that you're done fighting a water problem here.
Got her stable anyways. Morning, Mr. Chair, Board. I have before you today the courthouse tile project. Basically, to describe this project, anywhere you walk around the courthouse in the main lobby areas and you see the 1957 look flooring, we're proposing to add ceramic tile to all these areas. It's part of a capital improvement plan, and also it's a lot of broken areas, hard to maintain this older floor too as well. So this is a project we ran by the building committee, and they have approved this as well. So got 2 quotes here, proposing to go with the low quote with TNT tile at $77,141. So project start date, if approved, would be February 1st, and any questions, the funding itself would come out of the capital improvement bonding.
Which was, we had anticipated 80.
About 80,000, yep. So we're on the mark there, so.
I will move to approve this request.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kaylee, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion on the motion?
You don't want to keep the historic tile from
Yeah, I'm gonna miss it.
57?
It was nice in its day, I think.
Yep.
So.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thank you, Joe. Okay, then we have discussion and approval for plan for resource recovery backup power. Steve, are you going to lead this?
Yeah, I'll lead us off here, Mr. Chair. Just over the last, I mentioned last at our board meeting this past week that during our construction meetings here, probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, the committee became aware that in the initial planning portion of this project, there was not a backup power source in the event that we would have some sort of outage. Over the last few weeks, we've had a number of committee discussions and then subcommittee discussions with construction engineers and Burns and Mac on possible solutions. And essentially, we discussed 4 options within the committee. The committee has brought forward a proposed choice on what they would like to move forward with. And that would be providing a 200 kilowatt generator with an estimated cost that would include design and construction engineer fees for a total of $225,000. And with that, I'd turn it over to Joe to provide some additional insight on the power source and why it was chosen.
I think if you look at your slide there, the highlighted red areas, we determined, I think our basic need here was to make sure that in the event of a long power outage, trash could be processed from start to finish. So with here you have a generator that covers the scale house, the tipping floor, and the admin fee, powered up 100%. So that operation would not go down. Basically, we chose this option and chose to leave the household hazardous waste not powered up as backup. We have a plan to in the event that to go down to drain the water and stuff, but it would essentially have cost an extra $150,000 to upsize that, and we've just felt that wasn't the most cost-effective way. So, yeah, other than that, that's the option we came up with. And as far as the funding, I think Steve,
Yeah, and I would note, even with the draining of water in the household hazardous waste, unlike here today, our fire suppression there is a powder throughout the facility.
Right. Yep.
And so it would still, that pot would power the function in that household hazardous waste area. As we've talked about with all of our projects, we have different contingencies. A portion of this project that we're talking about would come from our owner contingencies. We've had a series of conversations here about some of the challenges that we've had just getting out of the ground within the project, but would of note that we currently do have dollars that would fund that within the owner contingencies. We have a number of other projects that will be coming through in change orders that will also probably have an impact that will probably take that owner's contingency close to pretty much zero. But what I did wanted to add, and if you recall back when we did the bonding of this project, because of our good credit rating at Clay County, we had the ability to take on a premium on top of that of our bond dollars, which the total bond premium that this board approved us to take was $894,811. And so the amount for repayment of principal and interest is factored into the bond with those dollars. And so while we certainly hope that we wouldn't have to use those, we took those additional dollars with the uncertainty that could happen. The only thing that these premium dollars can be used for is additional projects costs or paying down the principal and interest. And so whether we utilize the owner contingency, I bring that forward just from the standpoint of making sure that the board is aware that we do have additional fund dollars available to move us forward through the rest of the project.
In terms of the entire financial plan for meeting the payment of the bonds and everything that was included in there, technically what that premium means is we do have that amount, that premium amount, it really becomes extra contingency dollars. But it was certainly not intended to be spent, but to still meet all of our financial obligations. It's already included in the budget for bond payments. So even though you said we're going to be close to zero, taking that 225 out of contingency, we still have some room there should something else come up. And by the way, for our new commissioners, one of the things that we do find is that the majority of our change orders do come from the surprises underground and not quite as much once you start establishing building construction, unless you're in a remodeling project, but anyway. So. So, the recommendation then is to move forward with the backup power plan for $225,000 and take that out of owner contingency.
That's right, Mr. Chair, and I think just one last slide here. I think that the importance of the decision that we talked about during the committee is, right now, the project redesign for that portion would take about 4 weeks. We have an additional 34 weeks of lead time on the generator at this point, and then there would be an installation period to be determined. So we're right around that 40-week time frame, and I know this isn't a very good time for, large enough for you guys to see, but basically what that shows is if, with the board's decision and being able to make that order here within the next few weeks, we would be coming up at the end of the project, and we aren't able to receive approval from the city unless we have everything completed. And so with that, I would yield for any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Kaylee?
I am concerned at how fast we have chewed through those contingency dollars. But I don't dispute the necessity of needing this generator. And I appreciate that you were creative in taking hazardous waste off and finding ways to make it more affordable that way. So I would move to approve this request.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kaylee, second by Commissioner Abergren. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
All right. You'll let them know so they can get that ordered then, right?
Yes.
Right. All right. Next, we have a request approval for the 2022-20 MPCA County Feedlot Program Delegation, our agreement work plan, and we have with us our County Feedlots Officer, Craig Halverson, and Craig, we invited you here today because we have two new commissioners that we just thought maybe you could just give a high-level talk about what you do.
Oh, basically, go ahead, Frank. Pick me up a little bit.
Did you want to?
No, I just got a little bit when you said high level, but go
High level.
High level.
High level.
Oh, yeah.
Just, in other words, brief.
We don't get into that deep, Frank. We basically go out and make sure that every feedlot is not polluting water source or anything. The manure is spread properly, and everybody, in all honesty, is great to work with. They listen. I mean, you hear it from other counties that they're always battling. I don't know. You gotta reason with them. Sometimes you just walk away. I'll get back to you. You come up with a better idea. So then we get back together. Then they finally give in. Okay, this is what we gotta do. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good deal. We need the livestock in the county. So I need to eat.
So years ago, we had gone through MPCA through the feedlot inspection process and all of that type of thing, and several years ago, we elected to go away from that and go with Clay County Soil and Water Resource District and contract with them for that purpose. And
2008?
It's been quite a while now. But prior to this happening, there were a lot of problems regarding feedlots throughout the county, at least perceived problems, probably even more so than what there really were. But since we've gone and had this contract with Clay Soil and Water, and with Craig working on this, I've not received a complaint regarding feedlots, which is nice, because it used to be monthly that I would hear something from somebody not happy. But so, Commissioner Kaylee.
Craig, thank you so much for coming in. I'm sure a lot of it is just you've developed a great relationship with these folks. And a lot of problems can be solved by having a good relationship. So thank you for that. Just for the public listening, I'm wondering if you could just give a little overview of how many feedlots we have and how many head of cattle does that represent, or anything, you know, just a few details.
We just had re-registration again this year. They will not give us them numbers until, at one time they said 2 years. I don't know what takes so long. But they also said maybe next in 22. But right now, we're dealing with 89.
89 feedlots.
Yep.
And as part of that, we require a certain percentage of those go through 7% inspected every year, correct?
Yes.
So, unless there is a reason to inspect more.
Yeah.
Well, that could be something that might come forward through a complaint or something.
Correct.
And that inspection process, is that you heading out and meeting the owner and walking around, having a conversation? And
Absolutely. And in all honesty, we've done them all one time already. We've done the initial. So when you go back out, if there's any difference, there's going to be number differences. Other than that, it's all pretty good. We're losing a few more. That's where we're at right now.
I remember that number. I thought that number at one point in time was like around 120 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems like every year they have this 4-year thing, we lose a few guys.
is that reflective of just the cattle prices or retirements, or?
I don't think there's any kids that want to follow up and do it anymore. Young people.
So it's just folks getting out of the industry, probably.
Yeah, unless you truly love livestock, yeah, why would you stick around and do it? I mean, like I said, I like.
It's kind of been your life, hasn't it?
It has been, yes. Yep. Yep.
Well, Craig, thank you. I guess there was no action here. Well, we do need to approve the plan, don't we? The program.
Basically, all they want is a date on it. There's no signature spot,
Yeah.
so we'll mark it down.
Move to approve.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Craig. Good to see you again.
And you.
All right. All right, next we have a memorandum of 3-year agreement with the University of Minnesota Extension. And we have a regional extension director, Cecilia, is here with us. Good morning.
Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning?
Great, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So you have the MOA in front of you with the addendum attached to it, and I believe this is not the first time you're seeing this document. A few changes that we've made last time we were here, we talked about increasing that 4-H educator position to a full-time, 2 full-time positions. And I think we were able to bring that to 1.8 FTE and then cut the intern down. So you do still have 1 intern that is paid out of the Federation, which is in your addendum right there in front of you. So today we'll just we'll just be asking for signatures on the MOA and an addendum for the next 3 years.
Okay, and Steve, this is what we incorporated in our final budget, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Ebinger.
I would be remiss if I didn't speak on behalf of Commissioner Mojo, who's not here, but is a strong supporter of 4-H, and her kids are all involved in it. My wife is a master gardener and was on the committee last year representing master gardeners, and she's come back as a fierce supporter not only of the master gardener program but 4-H. And I think these are things that bring a lot to our community, and this is money well spent. So I'm very supportive of this. I'd like to make a motion we approve the MOA.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ebinger, second by Commissioner Kaylee, and I just want to point out, I agree with you about Commissioner Mojo's passion regarding extension and 4-H, and I share with that because my son went through that entire program at the same time as Commissioner Mojo did, and we spent a lot of years involved with that, and it's very, not only is 4-H really good, but extension in general does an awful lot of good things in our community, so. We're glad we could reach this agreement. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. All right, we'll get that signed document for you.
Thank you.
All right, committee reports.
Mr. Chair, did you want to do the addition?
Oh, which edition did I miss?
Oh. We had to.
Yes, that's right. I am sorry. Because we were going to do that with, yeah, so we have documents here. We had discussions regarding the a recent decision by the 6th District Court of Appeals, was it, Brian?
Yep.
That basically removed the stay that was in place regarding the OSHA situation. Kathy, thank you for coming back. And so we talked briefly about this yesterday at our ARPA committee. We have a lot of things that we have to plan for, but basically with that court action that happened is the regulations will go into place January 9th. I mean, yes, is that right? January 9th, I think is the date. And with that happening, we have to have, Anna, and you can help me out here, but we have to have proof of vaccine.
Correct.
By all of our employees.
Correct. We have to have every employee, full-time, part-time, seasonal, we have to have their current vaccination status as of January 10th.
As of January, and that is based on, the state of Minnesota adopting the federal OSHA regulations. And I believe the state of Minnesota has done that.
Yes.
So it's not, this is something that the county board isn't looking to do, but it's something that we're going to be required to do.
Yeah, our hands are tied. We're required to do this by federal OSHA and Minnesota OSHA.
Okay. So when we met yesterday, we certainly recommended that for the sake of HR and the need to do this, we need to give you the time and to start it now.
Correct.
So, and you want to talk a little bit about your, you had sent out a link. Do you want to talk?
Yeah, Steve's going to pull it up here.
Oh, okay, okay.
So because HR is required to receive or gather every single person in the county or every employee's vaccination status in the county, we put together a form that we will send out. It may change just slightly, but essentially we try to keep it pretty simple and straightforward on the information that we're required to collect, as well as the employee's vaccination card or a supporting document that contains the information of their vaccine status. So at some point in the near future, this would be sent out countywide for employees to complete. Because this is required, it will be a requirement that every employee, since everyone has a county email, that they complete this by January 10th. This would also give us the way that it's formatted will give us the means to make exports and provide the necessary information should OSHA request that. So basic information, name, date of birth, since those are required, the vaccine, which dose they got, whether that's Moderna, Pfizer, or Johnson & Johnson, and the date of those doses. So Steve does have it up here on the screen, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
And that information, as it's submitted, can you talk to the confidentiality of that?
Yes, so this document, once it's completed, it will come to HR. It will be filed in a secure folder in the employee's file, so it won't be accessed by anybody besides HR or a business need to know unless OSHA or OSHA if they request that. So it's not a public document.
Okay. Okay, and so this is required by January 10th. This county board then, I believe under the most recent regulations, and Anna, you can give us the dates, but I think we have to adopt a policy by February 10th?
9th.
February 9th.
Yeah, so it's kind of a not phase, but a two-section piece. We have to verify the vaccine status of every employee, as well as implementing a policy that talks about the weekly testing, which I know we'll get into in just a moment, requiring vaccines or the weekly testing. So the two pieces are verifying status, and then a policy on how we will handle that.
And again, the current federal regulation would be that those who are not vaccinated would have to have weekly testing.
A weekly negative test, correct?
And we have to have some discussion about how we're going to do that, and is it a rapid test or whatever. We still have to deal with all of that yet going forward. But one of the issues, and Kathy, part of the reason why I asked you here, knowing that we know this is coming now, and I think there has to be certain cooperation through public health and HR regarding this and how we're going to handle specifically the testing that's going to be required and what those, following those, and again, I'm calling them regulations. It's nothing that we're imposing. It's something that's going to be mandatory on us to do as a county. So, but the other piece of that is, you know, as we gather more of this information to get a better idea of how many weekly tests we could have, which we'll know once everybody submits their information, we're going to have to make sure that we're ready to cover and how we're going to cover that weekly testing. And if there's a process in place right now for us to maybe start considering how we go about ordering test kits and that type of thing so that we have them for our employees. So, but I don't know if you thought about that already, or do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we previously ordered test kits from the state a number of months ago in preparation for when this was initially discussed. Those test kits have since expired, and so the state will replace those. I believe there was 250 in those test kits, and then I secured an order, a one-time order last week for additional test kits. So I ordered the maximum I could order. So we'll have a great supply of test kits, and of course it depends on how many employees will need to be tested every week. My team looked at the information yesterday, did a draft testing policy, just a real draft. We haven't shared it with Steve or HR yet. We just got it completed. So we're kind of moving forward with what we plan to do. And the testing, we're already secured an area in the Family Service Center with our vaccines. So we certainly could alternate, you know, if we do it, and it will depend on the number of employees that need to be tested. So we'll have to determine that. Can we do it one day a week, or, because it has to be every 7 days. So it's not just once a week. It's, they're looking at, it's 7 days to get tested. So it's going to have to be specific. And so we have a spreadsheet already created where we can put the information that we need to down. For the test kits, we just have, for the state's purpose, I just have to state how many test kits we're using internally in Clay County. I don't have to report to them specific individuals. So that will, and you know, we'd have to share some information. We also will get, of course, the test results. So we can put those on a spreadsheet that will be confidential. If an employee, we talked about this briefly yesterday, if an employee is, you know, if we have a date and time, maybe it's all day, and it depends on how many people we'll have to provide the testing. I already assigned 2 of my nurses to be in charge of the process, and so so we're kind of moving forward with, we're going to be responsible to do this. So it will depend if I need more staff for testing. It's all dependent on the numbers we find out, who's not vaccinated. So we could then offer the testing in-house, which will be a really great benefit. We have the vault testing site, of course, externally, but it's nice if we can offer it in-house, and hopefully we can offer it 1 day a week, and that will satisfy the requirements. So we'll, you know, that'll be fluid. We'll make some decisions.
And I don't know that we're ready to answer certain things today. For example, of once a person gets tested, can they go right back to work while they're waiting for the result? You know, we need to still get all those rules, what those rules are.
And Mr. Chair, they're rapid tests. So.
And what you have ordered is the rapid test?
Correct. So 15 minutes at the most.
That's good.
10 to 15 minutes.
That's
So
what we're.
it won't be very long that they'll have to wait.
that's what we were hoping for, that they'd be the rapid test. Okay, yes, Commissioner Ebinger first, then Commissioner Keeley.
Yeah, Kathy, if we have an employee test positive, are we going to notify other employees, maybe not divulge the name of the employee that tested, but let them know they've been in contact, other employees that work immediately with them? Is that going to be kind of along the lines of contact tracing?
What we do now for a positive case employee is our contact tracers will follow up with them to provide them the correct information, and then we'll work with them on who potentially they would have been around. And then, so we hope the employee, we don't notify the department head, we hope the employee, and we let them know that they should let their department head know and supervisor know, but it's on them to do that. Because we can't divulge the positive test to someone else, but the employee can. And then in this case, might be a bit different where we'd need to notify HR. I'm not sure. We haven't finished all the reading of that information. So, but there will certainly be a follow-up. We'll also plan a follow-up if they don't show, if it's 7 days and they don't show. So employees will need to be accountable if they missed when their testing was, dependent upon, are they on vacation, are they gone somewhere, or are they just, so we'll have to work out all those details.
A follow-up, and this is probably for Steve. We have an employee who doesn't show up for testing, or an employee who doesn't cooperate with reporting their vaccine status. What are the consequences for the county, and what's anticipated on dealing with that employee?
Part of what Kathy spoke about in establishing that policy that we'll have to bring back for you will be identifying or asking you. We'll bring those issues forward, which you would then have to provide your guidance, insight, or approval for how we would deal with those employees that didn't comply.
That's part of the policy that we'll have to adopt, incorporate that. So.
What consequences if we don't?
Well, what we've been told is we can be potentially fined just under $14,000 per incident per person. So if someone missed 2 tests and we didn't have a policy in place to, in good faith, to make sure that happened, the county could be held up to a $28,000 fine in that example.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Keeley.
Back to the confidentiality piece. Will supervisors be made aware of who they're overseeing, as to make sure that they have time in the schedule to go and get tested, or who all is going to have access to that?
So it's not a HIPAA violation to ask somebody their vaccine status. So if a supervisor asks an employee their status and they say they're not vaccinated, well, that supervisor would then know they're testing weekly. But we would provide that as well because their vaccination status is not confidential information. Their vaccine card and the records and those documents associated with it are, but their actual status is not confidential.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll work with public health on that too, on collecting the name of the individuals that either don't return their vaccine form or proof of vaccine, and then those supervisors would be notified just, for scheduling purposes.
Mm-hmm. So then if Kathy discovers that they need more help with staffing, then will that be an ARPA request at some point?
That is precisely what we wanted to know, and obviously this is also going to be a burden on HR and public health.
Yeah.
In doing all this, and we have to recognize that these are burdens that are the direct result of COVID. And part of our ARPA funds certainly allow us to use a portion of those funds to offset those additional costs. And we've made it clear, I think, through our ARPA committee that we need to know and plan for those. And I think we'll have a little bit better idea what that could be once we know how many are unvaxxed, because that's where the cost is going to be, is in the unvaccinated.
And although our employees have until the 10th to provide their vaccination status, it would be encouraged that they do it as soon as possible, so that it allows us to plan and prepare properly.
So, yes, Commissioner Ebinger.
Just one more thing, just for the public's information, commissioners are considered employees for the purpose of this reporting, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So, so like we said, we met on this, we talked about this yesterday through our ARPA committee, and we've asked that it be agenda addition today so that the board could give HR the authorization to start this process, so it doesn't all fall on us all at one time on January 10th. So, and I don't know, Brian, if that would be appropriate for us to just have a motion to authorize HR to move forward?
Correct, Mr. Chair, that's what I recommend do.
All right. So,
I will happily make that motion. Let's get the ball rolling.
Second.
okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Cayley, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion on the motion? And this is just to start to gather information. All right. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. And I do know that Commissioner Mosher was part of the ARPA, and she was kind of encouraged this process as well on behalf of HR and public health, so that we're not swamped all at once, so.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just thank these people along this row here, HR, Public Health, and Brian's legal advice through this process. As you see, this temporary standard came out in November. It faltered or stopped, and we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And I think the work that they have done in preparation, not knowing whether or not it was going to go forward, but knowing that if it went forward, our window was going to be small to get it implemented. And so I appreciate their work, and we're in a good spot moving forward, even with a small time window. So,
thank you.
I got one more comment on that.
Yes, Commissioner Gross.
On that, it says we have to come up with a proposal. Isn't the proposal already made? If you don't have a shot, you don't work?
Well, yes, our employees are mandated to provide a status or submit to testing. But what we have to do within the policy is lay out what, one of the areas, to your point, would be laying out in the event that that person doesn't vaccinate or isn't providing testing, what's going to happen, what's the process of dealing with that employee.
I mean, we're going to notify all our employees they need to have the shot, right?
Well, they don't have to have the shot. They either have to have the shot or they have to submit
up
to
with
the
a
weekly
reasonable-
testing, yeah.
So once they're notified and they come by February 9th, if they don't have it, I mean, I sort of think it's sort of cut and dry, you know?
Yeah, we are still required to have something in writing, a policy. OSHA has put templates and documents out there that we can use for reference, and working with Kathy, since they've put something together as well. But we are required by OSHA to have a written policy in place.
You just got to write it down on another sheet of paper. This one already says.
Yeah.
You don't work. Okay, got it out.
Thank you. All right. Did we vote?
As you can see, I'm a proponent of getting the shot.
Yeah, you vote, there was a vote, yep.
There was a vote, okay, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go into now we can go into committee reports. Frank, Commissioner Gross, can we start with you?
The one meeting, Shack, my favorite, had a meeting on the 17th, it's a virtual meeting. They spend a lot of time on having a guy giving us a presentation on best practices and how to conduct a meeting. And the first thing was keep it brief, but he failed. It was a long presentation.
Boy, that seems like a slam on the board chair right there.
But the one thing that Commissioner Malcolm was on there, and she was talking about they're going to add money for infrastructure to all programs that we are expected to do. They're going to give them more money to to do those things. But her question was, does this, because Minnesota's having, what I think is a 7.7 million surplus.
Billion.
And she says, but does this mean that we have a surplus or are we just overtaxed? So that was what got out of that meeting. And what their main things they're going to be doing in the next year is to reinstate the wastewater group and to update cancer diagnosis. So those are the two main things they're going to work on. That was it for the meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Ebinger.
Thanks. On the 15th, I virtually attended the Joint Northwest Emergency Communication Board and RAC meeting. Had an interesting discussion from our systems administrator, Brian Zasterpill, discussing, particularly for rural school districts, the advantages of using the Armor communication system and how they can get a channel designated to them for region-wide communication with buses, school security, issues in the school, and good discussion, and we're thinking for a lot of our schools, we have school resource officers in them, but some of the rural schools don't, and that would be a valuable security measure for them. We approved the strategic plan for the next generation 911. We approved the inclusion of the Red Lake Band of CHIP on participating in the Armor interoperability, letting them migrate to the network system. That's going to allow their tribal police to communicate with sheriff's office and adjoining agencies. They have a new director of public safety at Red Lake, and he seems pretty sharp guy. He was born on the Red Lake Reservation, but he's been in California for 27 years working as law enforcement officer. And, I was pretty impressed with his take on this. We discussed the BCA encryption requirements that have come into play for on-air data. That's simply, if you use a data terminal in a police car, it's secure, there's encryption, and you can get federally regulated database information. But on-air verbal traffic needs to be encrypted now, and nobody seems to have the capacity for that. It's a federal issue, and we will wait for guidance on that. State's going to have to come up with means to address that. On the 16th of December, I met to discuss Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC issues with some of the Minnesota partners. I met with Mayor Carlson. County Administrator Larson was with us, City Manager Dan Molly, Council Member from Moorhead, Matt Gilbertson, Derek LaPointe was also there. We had general discussion on economic development in our areas and needs and the expectations that the Minnesota partners have in this area. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. Later that day, I attended the diversion board meeting at Fargo City Hall. Executive Director Paulson presented a year-end summary as part of his report. We've done a lot this year, as everyone's aware. It's pretty impressive summary of what's been accomplished in 1 year. He also updated us on the meeting with Chair Carlson, himself, some of the staff, and Council Shockley that they had in Washington, D.C. Senator Klobuchar and Senator Hoeven, along with their group, met with Acting Director Young of the OMB. They're very hopeful for a receipt of $180 million in funding that the Corps needs for this year's projects. Approve the cash budget and also public meeting calendar. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Cayley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, the Adult Mental Health Local Advisory Council Leadership Team met to make a plan for moving forward, and our next meeting, which takes place today at 3 p.m. in the Family Service Center in Room 4. This meeting is open to the public. Anybody can attend. The meeting is for consumers of mental health services as well as providers to get an idea of what's happening in the landscape, where roadblocks are for consumers in receiving services and for providers to network and figure out ways to best address the needs of their clients. Wednesday, I attended the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County Board meeting. We went through the budget and approved that. We also had a report on how items are added to the collection of the Historical Society, how they're cataloged, and that whole process. Of note, they do have a new exhibit that just opened on Nordic cuisine, so go and check that out. On Thursday, I attended the Clay County Suicide and Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition meeting. We had a presentation from Faye Seidler, who is an LGBTQ plus advocate, and she was talking about the LGBTQ school climate report. I just want to share a couple of the statistics from that. This is one of the target areas of the suicide prevention grants that public health has received, is focusing on. 61.1% of LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide. And that's 3 times higher than the general population. Suicide attempts are reduced by 40% when these youth have an affirming adult in their life, just one affirming adult in their life. And so one of the takeaways was to talk to kids, tell them that you love them no matter what their gender or orientation is. We also had a presentation from Kelly Felton of MDH on health equity. And Jason McCoy gave an update on some of the pillars of the work he's going to be doing with his Positive Community Norms grant in DGF. Then on Friday, I attended the Early Childhood Initiative meeting. Nicole Flick, who is the owner of one of the largest daycare centers in the county, ABC 123, which is in Dilworth, gave a presentation about her background and how she developed her business and how they've expanded. One of the cool things about her center is they provide diapers and wipes for their families because, frankly, most of their clients can't afford them. And she accepts lots of different forms of assistance that many other daycare centers don't, just due to all of the paperwork involved in and inability to staff adequately to handle all of that. West Central Initiative was also in attendance at that meeting. They noted that they have a grant for an artist to lead art therapy sessions at daycare centers to help young children process some of the trauma of the past few years and any other traumas that may be going on in their life. So contact Marcia Erickson at West Central Initiative if you are a center or a daycare that's interested in utilizing that. We continued working on our work plan for the next year, and we discussed a dental grant that we had received and we just got the materials for. We put together kits of family dental supplies as well as educational materials and a book for families. It's a really cute little kit, and those are going to be distributed through local Head Starts. We also discussed some other potential grants looking at early childhood mental health work. On Monday, I attended the Clay County Law Library Board meeting. We have a new law librarian. His name is Nate. That was his first day, so it was fun to meet him, and he's very enthusiastic. We also discussed a grant that we had received to bring back the law clinic that had happened previously and then stopped for a while. So this is for folks to come in and get help with filling out legal documents and things like that through Northwest Legal Services. We hope to start that back up in January. We're still working on the contract. The contract is not signed, so it's not final. We don't have the final hours that will be available, but we did receive the grant and we're looking forward to offering that service again. And I believe that concludes my reports. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on December 15th, we had our Prairie Lakes Solid Waste meeting, and that went very well. Our revenues over expenditures are doing quite well, so we are going to be putting in an additional $395,000 into our internal service fund because it had been budgeted in the past and we hadn't been doing it because we weren't in financial position to do that. So that is now being done, and by the way, that is also, all of it still, and what we're doing is to help keep our tipping fees low for all member counties. The waste deliverables for Clay County, we had fallen behind a while back, and by the end of the year, we should be caught up on our delivering the 8,400 tons as our agreement called for based on the amount of total tons needed for the year. The organization did receive from Minnesota County's Intergovernmental Trust a certificate of excellence for outstanding loss ratio under 50%. And we're, same thing there, there's a constant problem with hiring and the grid, so we did agree to enter into a wage study for that facility. So hopefully we'll see what comes of that. And I think the price tag to do that, of course, it's on a much smaller scale. I think the price tag on that we agreed to was $5,000 for that study. And that was also taken out of those revenues over expenditures. On the 16th, we had our solid waste advisory committee meeting. We had a presentation from Dr. Robert Zimmerman regarding the, right now we have all of our leachate is sent over to Fargo and we're looking at what would be the possibilities of Moorhead's treatment facility being able to handle that. And it's a complicated process. I want to thank Dr. Zimmerman for coming and explaining that to us. They are certainly open to looking into and studying what, if any, and what portion of the leachate they might be able to process through their facility. The way I look at it, I think we look at approximately $250,000 a year on sending leachate to Fargo, and if that revenue could be done in Moorhead, that would be all the better. So needless to say, we have to get rid of it. Take Back Jack was reported on, and that was also another good year in collecting and recycling the pumpkins. That same day, we also had a Clay County Joint Powers Authority meeting, and we approved a couple of moving reimbursements on some properties that had closed on earlier. We also approved a couple more appraisals on properties moving forward with the negotiation process. On December 16th, and on the same day again, we had the Diversion Authority meeting, which Commissioner Ebinger reported on. In addition to what he reported on, we also did approve the 2022 cash budget. That was also done. And then yesterday, I attended an audit interview based on our 2020 audit. And there's going to be a presentation to the full board on that. I can preliminarily tell you that we did receive an unmodified opinion, which is the best you can get. But I'll share in that, and based on what we talked about earlier today with our levy discussion, it showed in their documents that we had received our general fund was $1,696,896 increase in revenue over expenditures for 2020. In addition, the social services had another $295,250 for, that brings us close to a total of $2 million that we had in revenues over expenditures. And I think Steve mentioned that maybe 1.1 of it was due to CARES. I'll give them that for today. There still is 900,000 and we only used 300,000. And I still think we could have bought down the levy on behalf of all of our people by a little bit more. That's why I voted against the levy. The same day, we had the American Rescue Plan Committee, and we did talk a little bit about the diversity and ethnic community coordinator process that's going on, and the interview process that's going to be going in place. And I know Commissioner Kaylee and Commissioner Mojo are going to be involved with that process moving forward. And we did recommend, and I think that's going to be coming before the board here, probably next meeting, Steve. There was Cap LP had asked for some funding for their senior rural transportation, which is vital. And there's been some lost funding in that regard. And so we made a recommendation to fulfill their request to hopefully make them operational for all of our rural people who need that assistance for 2022. That concludes, let's see, is there anything else in there? Oh, and then of course we had the discussion regarding the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals doing that stay, which puts us in a time frame we have to for testing verification or vaccine verification. So, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Wednesday, we had county management, we had COVID discussion, followed up with the budget, ARPA funding, and also talked about the opioid settlement. Later that day, I worked with Commissioner Campbell in ensuring that we submitted the resolutions and for the opioid settlements to both the AG's office and also the three distributors in Janssen & Janssen, and we have received notification that all of the parties received our information to be part of that settlement. On the 16th, I met with Commissioner Ebinger and the representatives from the city of Moorhead in regards to the EDC that Commissioner Ebinger has already addressed. The MCC JPA meeting that has been addressed by Commissioner Campbell. On the 20th, participated in the exit meeting with the state auditors with Lori Johnson and Stacy Delstra. Again, I would say in the last 4 years, a great deal of work. We are always in a good position here at Clay County, but one of the best audit exit interviews that I've been a part of. And so credit to the great work that our departments do. Also then participated in the ARPA meeting, which Commissioner Campbell has addressed. And then yesterday spent some additional time with Mr. Melton, Kathy McKay, and Anna in regards to the vaccination addition that we had today. I also talked to Sheriff Empton on a series of Sheriff's Department issues. Just would note for the public that the county is going to be closed on Friday, the 24th, as the county recognizes that day as a holiday. With that, I would end my report.
Brian, do you have anything? No, nothing? Okay. Colleen, anything else for us? All right. We are adjourned.